Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going deep.
Deep.
Yeah, deep into a really pivotal period.
Okay.
The very beginnings of Islam.
Right.
So to do that, we've got excerpts from Sahih al-Bukhari.
Yes.
Essentially, it's a collection of sayings and traditions of the Prophet Muhammad,
It is.
compiled way back in the 9th century.
That's right.
Gives us a glimpse into the early days of the faith, the community, their beliefs.
And Sahih al-Bukhari is considered one of the most authentic collections of Hadith.
Okay.
These are reports of the Prophet's words and actions
Passed down
through generations.
Gotcha. And within these narratives, we've got three fascinating threads, I think, to explore today.
I'm excited.
We'll uncover how important intention is in every single action.
Yes.
Then we'll delve into how the Prophet Muhammad actually received divine inspiration, and finally, relive the challenging experience of the very first revelation. That marked the start of his prophetic journey.
Let's start with the concept of intention,
Okay.
a foundational concept in Islamic ethics.
Right.
There is a hadith narrated by Umar bin Al-Khattab,
Okay.
a close companion of the Prophet,
Right.
where he heard the Prophet Muhammad say, "The reward of deeds depends upon the intentions, and every person will get the reward according to what he has intended."
Now, this hadith was specifically talking about someone emigrating.
Yeah,
A huge step in early Islam.
absolutely.
People were leaving their homes, their families, everything they knew,
Everything.
to join the Prophet in Medina.
Exactly. And this hadith emphasizes that it's not just the outward act of emigrating that matters,
Right.
but the internal motivation behind it.
Okay.
If someone emigrates for worldly gain, maybe hoping for riches or power in Medina,
Yeah.
it's not the same as someone who emigrates purely for the sake of God, seeking a better life for their soul.
So even though their actions might look the same on the surface, the rewards are completely different because their intentions are different.
Right.
And this concept permeates all aspects of Islamic life.
Absolutely.
It elevates mundane acts to worship and reminds us that even seemingly small choices matter
Right.
because they reflect our inner state.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered how much your intentions actually shape your actions?
It's a powerful concept, even today.
Yeah.
Think about something as simple as giving charity.
Okay.
If you're giving just to show off,
Right.
it doesn't hold the same weight as giving sincerely out of compassion and a desire to help.
It's about aligning your heart with your actions.
Yes.
Now, this intense focus on inner motivation leads us to the captivating accounts of how the Prophet Muhammad received divine inspiration.
Okay.
For this, we turn to the account of his wife Aisha, who witnessed these incredible events firsthand.
Aisha's narratives provide an intimate perspective on the Prophet's life. She described 2 ways revelation came to the Prophet.
All right.
Imagine you're deep in thought, and suddenly a ringing fills your senses so intense it leaves you drenched in sweat, even on a cold day.
Wow.
That's how Aisha described one way revelation came to the Prophet.
That must have been an overwhelming experience.
It must have been.
But the angel Gabriel also appeared in the form of a man to convey the message directly.
Yes, 2 very different experiences, both conveying God's message.
Wow.
These accounts humanize the Prophet.
Yeah.
He wasn't detached from the experience, but deeply affected by these encounters.
Yeah, he makes the whole thing even more powerful.
Yeah.
Now, this brings us to the moment that changed everything.
Okay.
The very first revelation.
Yes.
Again, we have Aisha's account.
Right.
She tells us the Prophet loved spending time in solitude, meditating in the cave of Hira,
Right.
a place of peace and contemplation for him.
It was during one of these retreats that the angel Gabriel appeared to him. It was a sudden, overwhelming encounter.
Oh, wow.
Imagine you're alone in a cave,
Yeah.
and this powerful being appears and commands you to read.
And this is even more dramatic because the Prophet Muhammad was illiterate.
That's a crucial detail.
He couldn't read or write.
The command to read isn't just about literal reading.
Right.
It's about receiving and understanding the message of God.
Okay.
That's when the first verses of the Quran were revealed.
Right.
Read, in the name of your Lord who has created. This moment in that cave marks the beginning of Islam.
What's fascinating here is that Despite the monumental nature of this event,
Yeah.
Aisha's account reminds us that this was also a deeply personal experience for the Prophet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He was terrified by the encounter.
Oh, wow.
He went straight to Khadija, his wife, needing comfort and reassurance.
Wow.
Even in the face of the divine,
Yeah.
he was still a man experiencing fear. Khadija, being the amazing woman she was, immediately comforted him.
Yeah. Her support must have been incredibly important to him at that moment.
Yes.
She didn't dismiss his experience. She believed him.
Khadija's belief and support were crucial in those early days.
Yeah.
In fact, they decided to seek out someone who might help make sense of this experience,
Yeah.
someone knowledgeable about scriptures and divine matters.
And that's where Khadija's cousin, Waraqa bin Nawfal, enters the picture.
Yes.
He was known for his wisdom and knowledge of religious traditions.
Waraqa was a fascinating figure.
Okay.
Essentially a scholar of his time.
Gotcha.
He was a Christian who studied the scriptures and even wrote in Hebrew.
Wow.
He listened intently to the prophet's experience
Yeah.
and immediately recognized its significance.
And so Waraqa's affirmation
Mm-hmm.
must have been incredibly reassuring.
It must have been.
It highlights the human need for validation,
Yes,
especially when confronted with something so extraordinary.
absolutely.
So he confirmed that the angel who visited the prophet was Gabriel,
Yes.
the same angel who communicated with Moses.
He validated the prophet's experience,
Wow.
but he also warned the prophet
Oh,
of the challenges he would face,
what did he say?
predicting that people would reject his message
Oh, no.
and even try to drive him out.
So even from the beginning,
Mm.
there was this sense of looming trials,
Yes.
yet also this amazing support from Khadija
Right.
and validation from Waraqa.
It's fascinating
Yeah.
that after this initial burst of revelation,
Okay.
there was a period of silence.
Oh.
The divine communication paused for a while.
So what happened during this pause?
We have an account from Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari, another companion of the prophet.
Okay.
He described the prophet walking one day when he suddenly heard a voice from the sky.
A voice from the sky.
He looked up and saw the angel Gabriel sitting on a chair between heaven and earth.
Hold on. A chair.
It's a powerful image.
Yeah.
The prophet was understandably frightened.
I can imagine.
He hurried home and asked to be wrapped in blankets,
Oh, wow.
seeking comfort and protection.
He was really scared.
It was then that God revealed the verses, "O you, Muhammad, wrapped in garments, arise, and warn the people against Allah's punishment and desert the idols."
This resumption of revelation marks a turning point.
It does.
From a single terrifying encounter,
Yeah.
there's now a consistent flow of communication,
Right.
a divine mission taking shape.
And this mission to warn people
Yeah.
and call them to worship the one God
Right.
didn't exactly land on fertile ground everywhere.
I can imagine.
But to delve into that, we'll need to move on to part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay.
Welcome back to our exploration of early Islamic revelation.
When we left off, the Prophet Muhammad had just received
Yeah.
a powerful message,
Mm.
arise and warn.
Yes.
But that message wasn't exactly met with open arms everywhere.
7th century Mecca was deeply rooted in polytheism.
Right.
Tribal alliances and power structures were tied to idol worship.
Okay.
The idea of one God challenged everything they knew and held dear.
So the Prophet was rocking the boat big time.
He was...
How did that play out
Yeah.
in these early accounts?
Well, while Sahih al-Bukhari doesn't detail specific events from this early period,
Okay.
it offers glimpses
Okay.
into the growing resistance the prophet faced
Yeah.
and his unwavering commitment in the face of it.
I'm ready to hear about these glimpses.
All right.
What kind of resistance are we talking about?
It's important to remember that early Muslims often faced persecution and ridicule.
Really?
They were mocked, threatened, and even physically harmed because of their beliefs.
It's hard to imagine the strength it must have taken for them to remain steadfast in their faith during such hostility.
It truly is a testament to their conviction and the power of their message.
Right.
The prophet, known for his patience and compassion, consistently called for peace and understanding.
Okay.
He engaged in dialogue, explained the message of Islam,
Yeah.
and invited people to reflect on the truth.
So it sounds like he had to walk a fine line between holding firm to his beliefs and seeking peaceful dialogue with those who opposed him.
It was a delicate balance,
Right.
and it wasn't always successful.
I see.
Some people embraced the message with open hearts, while others remained resistant.
So even within Mecca, a divide was emerging between those drawn to the Prophet's message
Yeah.
and those who felt threatened by it.
Exactly. That tension grew over time,
Wow.
eventually leading to escalating conflicts
Yeah.
and the migration to Medina.
Right.
But Before we get ahead of ourselves,
Okay.
let's look at some of the key figures who played a role in this growing conflict.
Yes. Who are some of the individuals who fueled this opposition?
One striking example is Abu Lahab, the Prophet's own uncle.
His own uncle.
He was a fierce opponent of Islam.
You might wonder how even family could oppose such a profound message.
Well,
Well, Abu Lahab represented the entrenched power structures in Mecca.
yes.
That felt threatened by the Prophet's call for social and economic justice inherent in monotheism. This wasn't just about belief, it was about power.
You're right. Abu Lahab's opposition demonstrates just how deep the divisions ran.
Yeah.
And the Quran even mentions him by name,
Oh, wow.
condemning his hostility and predicting his fate.
So he wasn't the only one, though.
No, there were several powerful leaders in Mecca
Yeah.
who saw the Prophet's message as a threat to their established order.
Right.
They feared the disruption it would bring to their social hierarchy,
Yeah.
economic interests, and religious authority.
Makes sense? A new belief system that challenges the very foundation of your world can be incredibly disruptive.
It can.
What tactics did they use to counter the Prophet's growing influence?
They resorted to a variety of tactics. They spread rumors,
Oh,
accused him of being a liar and a sorcerer,
really?
and even tried to bribe him to abandon his mission.
So a full-blown smear campaign?
Yeah.
And some good old-fashioned attempted bribery.
Huh.
Did any of it work?
Not at all. The Prophet remained steadfast in his message. And his followers, despite facing increasing persecution, continued to grow in number and strength.
So the persecution took various forms.
Yes.
Economic boycotts aimed to cripple the community financially, while social ostracization aimed to break their spirit.
Right.
It's incredible to think that despite this pressure, the early Muslims stood firm in their faith. What do you think gave them the strength to endure such hardships?
I think a big part of their strength came from the message itself.
Okay.
The Quran's verses offered comfort, guidance, and a sense of purpose in a world that felt increasingly uncertain.
And of course, they had the example of the Prophet himself.
Yes.
His unwavering faith, his patience, his compassion. He wasn't just preaching a message, he was living it.
Exactly, and that made all the difference.
Wow.
Now, despite the Prophet's efforts towards peace and understanding,
Yeah.
the situation in Mecca continued to deteriorate.
Right.
The escalating tensions and increasing danger for the Muslims led to a pivotal turning point.
This turning point you're talking about is the Hijra, right? The migration to Medina.
Precisely.
Okay.
But to delve into that momentous event and explore what happened when the Muslims arrived in Medina, we'll have to continue our deep dive in the next part.
Welcome back. We're still deep into the early days of Islam,
Yes.
the challenges faced by the Prophet Muhammad and his followers.
Right.
Last we left off, things were really heating up in Mecca, and a major turning point was on the horizon.
That turning point was the Hijra,
Okay.
the migration of the early Muslim community from Mecca to Yathrib, later known as Medina.
Medina, a name that resonates throughout Islamic history.
It does.
What made the city so significant?
Well, Medina, about 250 miles north of Mecca,
Okay.
had a diverse population,
Right.
including Arab tribes and Jewish clans.
Gotcha.
Importantly, some of its inhabitants had already heard and were receptive to the Prophet's message.
So it offered a potential safe haven
Yes,
for the fledgling Muslim community.
it did.
So it wasn't simply a physical relocation.
No, this wasn't just about finding safety.
Okay.
The Hijra marked a strategic move that allowed the nascent Muslim community to establish their own social and legal framework independent of Meccan control.
I can imagine the journey itself.
Yeah,
Must have been quite dangerous.
it was.
The Meccans weren't going to just let them leave without resistance.
Absolutely. The Prophet and his followers were fleeing persecution, and the Meccans were determined to stop them.
Really?
There were plots to assassinate the Prophet, daring escapes and dramatic maneuvers. It was a perilous journey full of risk and uncertainty.
But eventually they did reach Medina.
They did.
What was the atmosphere like upon their arrival?
I think it was a mix of emotions,
Okay.
relief, and a sense of hope,
Yeah.
but also the daunting task of building a new life in a new city.
Right.
They had to navigate different customs, build relationships,
Yeah.
and figure out how to coexist with the existing population.
So this wasn't just about finding a refuge. It was about establishing a new society grounded in their faith.
Precisely, Medina became the cradle of the early Muslim community,
Okay.
a place where they could put their principles into practice.
So it's where the Prophet established the first Islamic state.
Yes, a community governed by the tenets of Islam.
That's quite a transformation.
It was.
What were some of the key elements of this new society they created in Medina?
Well, first and foremost, their social contract was based on Islamic principles, justice, equality, compassion.
Right.
These values permeated their laws, social structures, and interactions.
Can you give us some specific examples of how these principles played out in everyday life?
Certainly one striking example is the Prophet establishing treaties with the Jewish tribes in Medina,
Okay.
guaranteeing their rights and freedoms.
Wow.
This was a progressive step at a time when religious minorities often faced discrimination.
It speaks to a commitment to interfaith harmony and coexistence, an ideal that remains relevant even today.
Indeed, the Prophet also established a system of social welfare, ensuring the care of the poor and vulnerable.
Right.
He emphasized charity, kindness, and supporting one another.
It sounds like they were building a society that prioritized the well-being of all its members.
Yeah.
That's quite forward-thinking, especially for that era.
It was revolutionary.
Yeah.
However, it's crucial to remember that Medina was not a utopia.
Right.
Challenges persisted.
They couldn't expect the Meccans to simply accept their departure and new way of life.
You're right, the migration didn't end the conflict.
Yeah, okay.
In fact, it led to a series of battles between the Muslims in Medina and the Meccans.
So even as they built a new society, they still had to defend it.
They did. It was a time of great hardship and struggle, but also one of immense courage and resilience.
Wow.
The Muslims, despite facing a more powerful enemy, fought valiantly and ultimately emerged victorious.
This has been quite a journey. We started with the very first revelations, the importance of intention, those powerful encounters with the divine. We then saw the persecution they faced in Mecca, the challenges of spreading a new message in a resistant society.
Right.
And finally, we explored the momentous Hijra, the establishment of a new community in Medina, and their continued struggle for survival against all odds.
Yes, these early narratives aren't merely historical accounts.
Right.
They offer timeless lessons on resilience, the importance of community, and the transformative power of faith.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
And it's clear that the path of early Islam wasn't easy.
It wasn't.
It was a story of faith, perseverance, and ultimately the power of a message that resonated with those seeking meaning and purpose.
Absolutely.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the beginnings of Islam. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did.
As did I.